Hello folks, in this video I'm going to show you how to build a fully working shopping cart for this fabulous site of ours. We are using PHP and we are using the Trongate framework. And it's going to add up all of the items and all of that stuff, everything that you would expect. And as you can see, it's a very long video, so let's get straight to it. Now this video that I'm giving you here is actually a continuation from a tutorial that I posted on YouTube last week, I think it was. If you did not watch that tutorial, stay with us, it's okay. I'm going to show you how you can jump ahead and I'll give you a little shortcut in just a minute. But if you did watch the previous tutorial and you're happy to continue with what we've made, then skip forward to the time shown on the screen right now. So all of you folks who followed the last tutorial, and thank you so much for the thumbs ups, please do skip ahead, and that's when the lesson actually starts. Now, if you came in cold and you missed the video previously, don't worry, you can go back and check it out later on. I do recommend checking it out, but stay cool, because right now I'm going to give you a little shortcut so that you can catch up, okay? So, for those of you who are coming in cold, I want you to first of all get XAMPP or PHP in MySQL, however you like it, on your computer. I like to use XAMPP because it's easy. So, I'm going to be using XAMPP and I'm going to set it up, okay? So, this is me just setting up XAMPP. There we go. And I'm just going to make sure that PHP and MySQL is up and running. So if I start Apache, there we go. MySQL is already running here. So we're looking for two green lights, those of us who like XAMPP, and I do like XAMPP. The next thing, I'm going to ask you to head over to GitHub, to the URL shown on the screen. Now I'll leave a link in the description. And I want you to click on this green button here that says code. When you click on that, you'll have a pop-up thing like this, and we're going to choose download zip. So I'm giving you a shortcut so that you can join in if you've came in cold. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to save it to, I'm going to save it to applications, XAMPP, htdocs. That is where my websites live. So I'm going to hit save. There we go. So I've just saved that zip file into my htdocs folder. Now here it is here, and I'm going to extract it just by double clicking. There we go. Now I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to rename it to Stallone. We're building a shop. Do you know Sylvester Stallone has an online shop? It looks a wee bit like this one. So that's what we're doing. Now if you can, I'm going to ask you to change the permissions. On a Mac, you can say get info. Undo this little padlock thing. And you can say read and write and apply to enclosed items. And that's going to change the permissions so that PHP can read and write files. If you don't have a Mac, or if you're not comfortable with what I've just shown you, another way of doing that is if you open up the terminal. I'll just show you here. So you would cd into where the websites live. So applications, XAMPP, htdocs. And then you would say sudo chmod -r. That means recursively. Now I'm going to set the value to 777. And the name of the directory is Stallone. It's going to ask for a password. Chuck in your password for your computer, and that's us. Now, the reason why we're changing the permissions will be revealed in just a moment. First of all, though, I'd like us to go to localhost and head into phpMyAdmin or whatever you may have. Okay? So here's phpMyAdmin. If you have something else, that's fine. Now let's pretend I don't have this Stallone database. Pretend you never saw that. So I'm going into databases and I'm going to create a database called Stallone. Create. There you go. It's an empty database. Okay, so now it's showtime at the Apollo. By the way, I should also say, let's open this up in our text editor, shall we? Let's do that as well. Now, I like to use Sublime, but you can use whatever makes you feel good. Now, let's open up the thing. So it's in Applications, XAMPP, htdocs, Stallone, and open it up. Okay. Now, you may need to go into config database.php and change your settings. You might. But for most of you, that will probably work actually. And you can see if I look at config.php, we've got a base URL here. You see the base URL? So I'm going to copy that, and we can close all of this stuff. And then I'm going to head in to that base URL. And it's going to say that it's found some SQL files. Now I left, well actually it's just one SQL file. And I left this in the app inside the, I believe it was the welcome module. And what this means is that we can view this SQL file that I've left for you and then run the SQL. And it's going to set up all of the tables that we need. And then when we click OK, it now takes us to this fabulous home page. The reason why we did all of the chimod shenanigans, by the way, was so that PHP could delete that SQL file. If you were unable to figure that out, you might have to manually go in and delete that SQL file once you've executed the code. But now, look at this. We have a shop. We have items. It's all happening. And we've even got a bunch of database tables here. So, I assume that you are ready to rock. And with your permission, let's rock and roll. Now, the first thing that I want to do is open up modules, merch, controllers, merch, and you can see that we've got a display method. This is the method that is coming because we know that this is being loaded. If we look at the first segment, you'll see that it says merch. That tells us the module name and the controller name. And then we've got display, that's the method. So we are in here, let me make this a bit smaller. And what it basically does is it fetches some item information, builds up an array, and then passes it into a template. That's what's happening, okay? Now we can view the information that is being passed into our template quite easily by simply saying JSON data, true. If we save and refresh, you'll see a nice summary of all the information that's being passed into our view file. Now, by the way, JSON, this is something that I made. It just makes the code look nice. And true adds a little die statement. It's exactly the same as doing that, okay? So now you know what true does. Now, one of the things that you can see here is called in stock, and it's set to a 1. Now, if we go to our admin panel, so I'll open up a new tab, and it's at store_items/manage. Well, you can see that we've got one item, and we can update the item details. By the way, I'm zooming in like this all the time. This is my new trick. I hope it's not too annoying. But you see how we've got in stock here. Now, if we tick it so it's not selected, I'm going to hit submit. Okay, so it's no longer in stock. And if we go back and refresh, can you see how in stock now says 0? Okay, so this is the first thing that I want us to focus on. Let's get rid of this JSON thing, and let's open up Views, Display, Item. Right underneath this description here, I'm going to say if in stock, if in stock is equivalent to, let's say, 1, then we're going to, let's just have a paragraph and we'll have add to cart form. We'll figure it out in a minute. Don't worry about it. Otherwise, we're going to echo a little paragraph, little bold thing here. And let's just say this item is currently not in stock. That's stock, not stock. No, hang on, not sock, you crazy rock and roller. Anyway, let's refresh the page and here we go. And you can see that it says right down here that the item is currently not in stock. Now, if we go to the admin panel, update the details. Now I'm going to make it in stock and submit. And if we refresh, there we go. Pretty cool. Now, folks, there are a million complications, a million situations where you might want to do something a bit more advanced than this. For example, instead of just saying it's currently not in stock, perhaps you could say, here are some similar items. Maybe you could say, leave your email address and we'll let you know when it's in stock. But I'm going to let you figure all of that stuff out, if that's okay. I'm just the tutorial guy, and it's for you to fill in the gaps. Alright, so let's focus now on our add to cart form. And it is just a form, by the way. Like any form, it's going to need a form location. I'm going to go underneath this thing here, where we've got the data array established. And I'm going to say data form location is replace, so string replace. Now have a look at the URL. You'll see we've got /merch, /display, /. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here. Then we're going to replace it. But instead of it saying /display, we're going to say add to cart. And what are we going to do that to? The current URL with parenthesis. Now, just as a reminder, we are using the Trongate framework here. And the Trongate framework has a thing called current URL. You can call it anywhere. I'll do a little die statement. And sure enough, it gives you the URL that you are currently on. So all we're doing is we're establishing a form location where it's going to be basically the same URL except add to cart. In fact, we can even start on add to cart. Let's do a little function down here. Maybe I should say a method. I'll call it add to cart. We'll go like that. And I'm just going to echo hello and save. Okay. So there we go. We have created a form location and we're passing it into our view file. Now back over to the view file here. So we'll get rid of this thing that says add to cart form. And instead we're going to echo form label and I'm going to say item size. By the way, I have a wee colon up here upstairs. We don't need it. I'm going to just take it out, okay? Now, the way that this works is we're going to have a selected... Now, please just watch the screen. Relax. Relax your fingers for half a minute. We're going to have an item size ID, and it might be empty. We're going to have an array of size options. So let's say, for example, the empty one is going to have something like select size or something. We might have size options with a key of 1, which is small. Maybe we've got size options with a key of 2 is large or something like that. So we get an array of size options, a selected thing, and the way that it works, say your T's, is we echo form drop down. We chuck in a name for our select menu, such as item size ID. Chuck in the size options. I assume you're just watching. And then chuck in the item size ID. Now I'm going to save, refresh, and you can see that we have a fabulous drop down. That's how it works, and now you know. However, I'm not going to just hard code the stuff in. That would be crazy. So let me just clear the decks, and now that we know what we're trying to do, I assume that you have this. Let's code and let's do this Jedi style. So back over to the controller. Right. Underneath our data form location, I'm going to say data item size ID. And I'm going to do one of those ternary operators. So it's a condition. So if something happens, then X, otherwise Y. That's the format. Now the condition is going to be if is numeric. If what's numeric? Post item size ID. Then our data item size ID will equal post item size ID. That's how we're going to do that. Otherwise, we'll have it as an empty string. Okay, now remember that's really just the same as an if-else statement. If you prefer an if-else statement, you can do that. It's absolutely fine. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch the sizes that have been assigned to this item. So I'll say data size options is this. I'm going to say underscore fetch size options. Now, to fetch the size options, I'm going to pass in the item ID. And if you look upstairs, you'll see that we do have an update ID that represents the item ID. So I'll say update ID. Then I'm going to pass in our selected item size ID. So that's data, item size ID. And now I'm going to head downstairs for no particular reason. I'm going to build a little method here called fetch size options. Now remember, it takes in an item ID and a selected size ID. The whole purpose of this is to establish an array of options. Now I'm just setting up an empty array, which is very good for error prevention. So we're basically going to set up an array of options. It will be key value pairs, and then we're going to return the options. That's how this works. So let's start off by saying if selected size ID is an empty string, then options with an empty string is going to be select size. There we go. Now I'm going to fetch the sizes that have been assigned to this item. This is going to require a little table join. Are you any good at table joins? Well, I'm not, but that's okay, because Trongate is the only, do you hear me, the only framework in the world that gives you a free graphical query builder. Let's open up the Trongate desktop app. Now, if you don't have this, you can get it free of charge from trongate.io/download. I keep annoying everybody by saying it's free, and it's always going to be free. But I have to say that because people don't believe me. And I've seen online people saying, there's no way that's free. I'm telling you, it's free. It's always going to be free. Anyway, with this desktop app of ours, we can do table joins quite easily. Now, I'm going to modify existing app. I'm going to choose the Stallone app. Now, it just so happens I'm on it, but I'll pretend I wasn't, right? So I'll go to XAMPP, htdocs, Stallone. There it is. I'm going to modify this app. Now, you'll probably get something like this, Trongate version blah blah blah. is available. When that happens, it usually just means there's a new feature, or in this case actually a few little minor tweaks and corrections. It's no big deal. So to get updated to the latest version of the framework, just click and then update to whatever version number it says on the screen. So here we go. And it's now updating the framework. That's us updated. And if you're curious, by the way, it just updated the engine folder, nothing else, okay? So I'm going to open, remember we have selected the Stallone thing, and I'm going to open the query builder. Here we go. And here it comes. I hope you like the look of it. I based it on the Macintoshes of the mid-1980s. I kind of like the look of those things, you know? Anyway, over on the top left here, we have a stack, and this represents all of the tables that are on our Stallone database. So there's store items. In fact, let's just grab store items and drag it here. We have item sizes. I'm going to click and drag it here. Maybe move it to the right. We'll leave a little space. And then I have this table with a big long name, which I'm going to click and drag here. Now this table, associated store items and item sizes, is what IT people call a pivot table. The purpose of this table is to join store items and item sizes. And you can kind of see how it works, right? We take the ID from store items, we join it to store items ID, little inner join here. Then we take the item sizes ID, join it to the ID on item sizes. Another inner join will be fine. In this instance, we're looking for the ID and the size description from item sizes. And yes, we can click Show SQL and it gives us a fabulous table join. So we can obviously just copy that and then paste it into our editor. However, when you think about this code that we've got here, we already know the item ID and we're only collecting size information. So strictly speaking, I mean, I hope you liked the visualization exercise, but strictly speaking, we don't even really need this. So I'm going to click this, drag it to the left and just drop it. And now if I go to Show SQL, the query's a little bit more simple. I'm going to copy that, head into the editor, and I'm going to be using query binding. Query binding is the modern and the safe way to do custom SQL queries. Here's how it works. I'm going to say params item ID equals item ID. I'm going to say SQL equals and paste in all of that stuff. Have a little indentation, space out, and then we'll add in a where clause. I'm going to say where, and it's going to be where associated blah 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 dot. Now the column name is store items ID, so store items ID equals, and we say colon item ID. That is how you do that. Now when we run this, it's going to return some rows. So I'm going to say rows is, let's load up the model. We say query bind, we pass in the SQL, pass in the params, and don't you love an object. So this third area or third argument is really just a declaration of how we want our data to be returned. You can say object or array. Now it's going to be an array of rows, but I'm saying each row can be an object or an array. I'm going to choose object for no particular reason. We can say JSON rows true if you want and have a little look at the data. So here it comes. Oh gee, hang on. Rows, JSON rows. There you go. And there's our data. Now, as nice as that is, it's not quite the format that we are looking for. So I'm going to say for each rows as row, let's just say options row ID is row size description. So now if I say JSON options true, check this. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's an array of key value pairs and it's all ready to be passed into our method upstairs. So I got slightly lost there. By the way, if you see me doing tutorials and I go, it's because I don't have notes, okay? I do not have notes. Alright, so that's our size options. Now, let's just save this and we'll go to display item. And right underneath this item size, I'm going to echo form drop down. I'll call it item size ID. I'll pass in the size options and, of course, the item size ID. So save it. And then let's refresh. And if you look here, we have a fabulous drop down. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Now I'm going to think about item quantity. I'm going to say data item quantity equals, and I'm going to do another one of those ternary operators. So I'm going to say if is numeric, I'll say post item QTY. So if that is numeric, then item quantity is post item quantity. Otherwise, I'll say that the default quantity is 1. So that's what I'm going to do there. Now, we don't have a post item quantity anywhere. But let me just show you something. If I say banana is post banana, you will agree that we don't have any post banana here, right? But if I do var dump banana with a die statement, you can see that it will assume an empty string even though we haven't declared any posted variable. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, look, check for an item quantity. If you have one that's numeric, great, that's our quantity. But if we don't, let's just assume that the quantity is 1. That's all that does. And again, it's just a shorthand way of doing an if-else statement. So let's save that. And we'll go into the item thing again. I'm going to echo form label. I'll just say quantity. And then underneath, I'll echo form number with a name of item QTY and a value of item QTY. Let's actually go for gold and echo form submit with a name of submit and a value of add to cart. Save it. Head on back to the page, refresh, and look at that. It's fantastic. Now, because we said form number, we can move up and down. We've got this little thing here, and it's all rather cool. Now, I just realized that I forgot to do the form opening and the form closing tags, so let me do those right now. I'm going to echo form open, and yes, we do have a form location. And at the end of this, I'll echo form close. Now don't forget, the form open is going to give us an opening form tag, something like that. And the form close tag is going to give us a closing form tag. But it's going to do a whole lot more than that actually. And let me show you what I mean. You see, if we hit add to cart, it takes us to hello. There's no surprise, we made the endpoint a minute ago, right? But check this out. I'm going to right click on add to cart and inspect. And you'll see in the inspector here that we've got a token, CSRF token. Now I'm going to double click in here and just add in some stupid values. And then carefully, I'll click off, and I'm going to click add to cart. Now remember, I'm going to just show you something. If I take you to a new tab, remember that this is what the home page looks like, okay? That's our home page. This is the shop and all of that stuff. Now you can see that I've changed the token here. And when I click add to cart, it's going to take us straight back to the home page. Check it out. There you go. See? So the reason why we say form close like this, and the reason why we do things like this, is because when you do that, you get all of this super cool security built in. You don't even have to know about it. It's a fantastic system. So, with that being said, let's now think about this add to cart process. Now at the moment, I've just got it saying hello, which is a bit ridiculous. Now, of course, we're going to turn it into a validation situation. Remember, folks, even though it's an add to cart thing and it's a shop, it's really just a form. So we're going to do some validation. I'm going to say this, validation helper, set rules, and each of these things requires 3 arguments, okay, when we're setting rules. The first argument is the name of the form field. For example, item size ID. The next is a label, such as size, or item size if you want. Finally, we add in the rules that we would like to have applied. So I'm going to say required, and I think I'm going to say numeric. Okay, so that's all the rules that I want applied to the item sizes. Now let's do some validation rules for the quantity. I'll say this, validation helper, set rules, item QTY. Now the label is quantity, and for this one I'm going to say required, little pipe symbol, then I'm going to say greater than 0 in square brackets. So the quantity must be greater than 0. Now if you're wondering where does this all come from, I'll show you. Have a look at the Trongate website, click into the documentation, and when you get to the documentation, search for validation helper. Do a search and you'll see the form validation helper, and here are all the rules. They're all right there if you need them, okay? So now you know. So there's our validation rules. Don't they make you feel good? And when we run these, we're going to get a result. The way that we run our validation rules is we load up the validation helper and we invoke a method called run. This will always return true or false. If the result is true, then well done. We can add it to the basket, which we'll do in a minute. Otherwise, well, that means there was a validation error, and we can say validation errors like this with parenthesis, and it will show us the errors on the screen. Let me demonstrate. So I'm going to save. I'm going to head back to the item. Now check this. I have select size here showing, and I've not selected a size, but the quantity is okay. I'm going to click add to cart, and as you can see, it says the size field is required. Now let's assume that I had a quantity of 0 or -3 or something. If we hit add to cart, now we've got 2 validation errors. But of course, wouldn't it be nice if we actually presented the page and did something a bit more graceful than this? Well, you can, and it's just 2 lines of code. We're going to say this, display, then we're going to go to our view file, and right underneath the headline, we're going to echo validation errors and save. So now, when there's a mistake, it takes us back And now you can see the validation errors under the headline. Of course, you can have them anywhere you like. And if everything is okay, let's say medium, I'll have 3 of them. And now it says, well done. Pretty cool, pretty cool. So now we are going to focus on, let's add this to the store basket. So we're going to create a store basket table. We could use the code generator for this, but I'm feeling kind of crazy, so let's just do it manually. So we're going to head over to PHP, MyAdmin, or wherever you like to go. And on our database, we're going to create a table. It's going to be called store basket. It's going to have 7 columns. Now, we're going to have an ID column. It's going to be an integer. We'll leave everything else and we'll tick this auto increment box. So that means it's going to be primary key, okay? So we've got an ID. We're also going to have date underscore added. That will be a Unix timestamp. So we'll keep it on integer and we'll let it do the default. I think it's 11 characters. That'll be fine. Moving along, we're going to have item underscore ID. Again, it's going to be an integer. We can leave the length on a default. That's fine. Moving along, we're going to have item size ID. Again, that will be an integer. You can leave everything else as it is. Then we're going to have item QTY, the quantity. Once again, that will be an integer. Leave everything else. Then we're going to have a session ID. Now, the session ID is going to be a variable character. And session IDs, I think they're 16 characters. I think. But you know what? There's no harm in a little bit of future proofing. I'm going to make it 32 characters. There you go. Finally, we'll have a code. You'll see what that's for shortly. So each and every row on the store basket table gets a unique code. It's going to be a variable character of 16. There we go, okay? So that's our table. Let's click save. Well done. Now, let's get back to the business of adding this to the store basket table. I'm going to say data item ID is segment 3. I'm going to say data item size ID is post item size ID. Then I'm going to say data item quantity is post item QTY. Now I have missed out a few fields there, but quite deliberately, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create manually a new folder inside modules called store basket. Store basket is going to have a controllers folder and a views folder. Inside controllers, we're going to have a file called storebasket.php. Look out for the uppercase S. We're going to do a little PHP opening. Class store basket extends Trongate. And I'm going to do a little method here called add to basket. It's going to accept some data. Now, the idea here is that merch is going to pick up the basic detail from the form and whatnot. But then we're going to load up store basket. So we say this module store basket. And then I'm going to get store basket to finish off the job of doing the insert. And you'll see why in just a second. So this store basket underscore add to basket. And it's going to accept the data. So into store basket, Remember that we are taking in a data array, but we're just going to build on top of it by saying data date added equals time. It's a timestamp. We're going to say data session ID equals, now if we say session underscore ID with parenthesis, that will give us that. Then I'm going to say data code equals make rand 16 characters. Now let me just check the table. I think that's all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, that's the one. And that is perfect. Now, the idea is going to be that we're going to say this. Let's load up the model and insert the data into store basket. That's what that's going to do. But then we're going to do something kind of cool. We're going to have a little method down here with an underscore. It's going to be called remove old records. Now I'm going to write this kind of longhand, but if you want to do this with less lines of code, be my guest. I'm going to say now time equals time. I'm going to say 1 day is 86400. Now that's the number of seconds in a day. Then I'm going to say params ancient history equals now time subtract 1 day. And then I'm going to do some SQL. I'm going to say delete from store basket, where doesn't really matter if you do these in uppercase or lowercase, by the way. I'm just doing it uppercase here for clarity. So delete from store basket where date added is less than colon ancient history. So as you can see, I'm setting up a little bit of query binding here. So we load up the model, we say query bind, pass in the SQL and pass in the params. There's no need for a third argument here because we're not returning anything. Now the cool thing about having the store basket takeover is that as soon as we've done the insert, we can do a little bit of table maintenance and simply say remove old records. And what that means is that if you come back to this shop in 10 years time, you're not going to have a million rows or anything, you know, all sorts of junk. Well, you might have, maybe you'll have a million orders, but you're not going to have a basket table that's bloated and slow. This is going to automatically look after itself. And that's the whole idea. So let's head into merch. And you can see that I've got store basket adding to the basket here. Now, after that's happened, I'm going to send the user to a view basket page. So to do that, I'm just going to say redirect store basket. Let's do / display. Okay, so now on store basket, we're going to have a method upstairs, little function here called display. And this is going to attempt to fetch items that are in the basket for this user. So I think this is a good time to call upon the query builder again. So here we are, it's still open. I'm going to close this window and then open the query builder again. I'm doing that because we do have a new table, a table called store basket. Actually, here it is here. Now I'm going to drag in store items. I'm going to drag in item sizes. Now with store items on the left, and it is important that you do it this way, I want you to click on the ID on store items and connect it to item size ID. we're going to have an inner join. Then I want you to click on, oh, do you know what? I made a mistake there. I joined it to item size ID. That's okay. You can just click clear joins if that happens, and we do that again. So it's the ID on store items joining to the item ID on store basket. There we go. Inner join. Now I'm going to take the item size ID on store basket. I'm going to click. I'm going to join it to the ID on item sizes. However, it's possible that we could have items that don't have sizes. For example, a television. And for that reason, I'm going to choose a left outer join. There you go. Now the fields that I want for our shopping basket, just to look at, well, you can have anything you want, but I'm going to have an item title, a price. I think I'll have a quantity. Let's have a code from store basket, and let's have a size description. So now I'm going to go to show SQL. There's our table join. Now be honest, could you have figured that out? You think so? Do you think so? I'm not sure. I couldn't have figured it out. But anyway, I'm going to copy the SQL and then head back in here. And I'm going to say params session ID is session ID. SQL equals, let's paste it in. We'll do a little bit of indentation. And we're selecting all of that stuff where, and it's going to be where store basket dot session ID equals colon session ID. That's the thing. And by now you are becoming a query binding expert. So think about what this is returning. It's a bunch of rows from the table. So we'll call it data. You don't have to call it rows. You can call it items. So items is this. We're calling on the model. We're going to say query bind, pass in the SQL, pass in the params. Don't you love an object? And if you want, we can say JSON data, just so that we can look at the information coming back. So save it. And we're going to go back to our page. Let's see here. And let's just have maybe 3 medium t-shirts. I'm going to add to cart. And there you go. Pretty cool. And that has added to the store basket table. Let me prove it. So if I now take you to store basket, there you go. And everything looks perfect. Now, what I want to do with this is create a page where people can look at the basket. So I'm going to say data view file equals, I'll call it display basket. Now, of course, you can call it anything you want, but then I'm going to say this template. We'll have the public template and we'll pass in the data. Save it. So now, into views for store basket, and it's a new file called displaybasket.php. We can have a little section with a headline. We can say your basket, save it, and refresh. So there we go. Now I think I'm going to align to the center. So class equals text center. I think I like that. And we can, of course, say JSON data, and we get a nice summary of all of the information that we've got here. You can see that we've got an array of items, by the way. And we can say in PHP, num items is count items. If I echo an H1 with num items, you know what it's going to say. Of course, I'll just close this off. It's going to say 1 because I've got one row in the basket. So let's just assume then that if num items is greater than 0, then echo, I'll just write display basket. We'll come on to that in a minute though, right? But otherwise, we're going to echo a paragraph with a class of text center. And I'm just going to say, you have no items in your basket. Okay, so if we save and refresh, of course we've got an item. Now let me just cheat. I'll change this number to 10 so that we can see this, right? So when it's empty, that's what we're going to get, okay? Alright, so let's take it back to a 0. And now we're going to display the basket for this user. Alright, so there's going to be some HTML here. Remember that this is a view file. Unfortunately, PHP can be mixed in with HTML, so I'm closing off the PHP here. I'll open it up here, and now I'm going to have a table with a row, and we'll have 2 table headings. I'm using Emmet here for speed. I'm going to say item details. I'm going to say amount. Then I'm going to go into PHP. I'm going to say for each items as item. There we go. Now once again, I'll close off PHP here. I'll open it up. Whoops. Here. And for each and every one of the rows on store basket, I'm going to just paste in maybe even a little indentation. And instead of a TH for table heading, we'll have a TD, which means a normal table cell. Now we can, of course, say JSON item if you want a little reminder of what that looks like. And if we save and refresh, here is the beginning of our basket. Okay, so I'm seeing a title, price, size description, and a quantity. So let's do paragraphs for each of these things. So I have a paragraph, maybe with a little bold thing, and I'll say item title. And let's just echo item, loading up, item title. Save, refresh, there you go. I'm keeping my JSON thing there just as a guide, you know, so I know what I've got access to. And underneath item title, I'm going to say item size. So that is going to be item loading up, size, description. Save, refresh. There we go. Let's do another one of these and we'll have quantity. Actually, let's have the price. So it's item price or unit price if you prefer. So that's item loading up. Now what did we call it? It's item price. So item underscore price. Chuck in a little euro or a dollar symbol if it makes you feel good. Maybe a pound, whatever you want. There we go. And then underneath this, I'm going to have quantity. Here we go. Quantity. So item loading up, item QTY. Save and refresh, and there we go. Now this has pretty much served its purpose. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a paragraph with a class of text right. And I'm going to have a link. I'm going to say anchor. Now this is going to go to a remove URL. And it's going to say remove. But let's add in a little icon. So I'm going to say I class equals just like this. And we do have font awesome loaded. So I'm going to say FA hyphen trash. And so if I go upstairs it's quite easy to say remove URL is base URL. Actually, we don't even need the base URL. We can just say store basket / remove. And you remember that code that we had on the basket rows? Now you know why we had it. I'm going to say item loading up code. Perfect. Now save, refresh, and doesn't that look cool? So I'm going to do a little bit of CSS here. I'll do it directly onto the page just to make it look a bit better. So I'll say style, and I'm going to say if we've got a section with a TD, well, let's just say vertical align is top, and let me just save and refresh. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Let's also say if we've got a section with a TD of nth child 2, then the text align is center. Okay, did you see the amount there? Then I'm going to say if we've got a section with a link, so A, I'll say text decoration none. And in fact, I just thought of this. When we hover, so hover, I'm going to say color red. There we go. Okay, so just a wee bit of styling. So if we refresh, I'm hovering and you see it's going red. You can also see the cells changing colour. Now if that annoys you, and it kind of annoys me, we can say background colour is white. There we go. Isn't that fantastic? Alright, now I'm going to do remove item in just a minute, but first I want to think about totals. At the top of this loop, we're going to set a variable called grand total equal to 0. Then, in here, we're going to have a row total. Now, the row total is going to be item loading up item price multiplied by item loading up item QTY. That's our row total. And as we loop through this, I'm going to say grand total equals grand total plus row total. There you go. So we're going to have one more row at the end of this. So TD times 2. On the first TD, I'm going to say class is text, right? And I'm going to say amount. And then I'll have a little $sign and I'm going to echo. Actually, let's do number format. Number format, grand total, comma 2. That comma 2 is going to give us 2 decimal places, and it's also going to add commas in if the price is over 1,000. So if we save, refresh, there you go. Looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. So now let's look at this amount here. We're in the loop where it says amount here. I'm going to do a $sign. I'm going to echo number format row total, comma 2. Okay, that looks good. And now we're going to do remove. So when we click remove, it takes us to store basket, remove, and then we've got a code. So let's just build this. Maybe here. Okay, so it's a little method called remove. And I'm just going to say params code is segment 3. And then I'm going to say in the SQL, delete from store basket where code equals code. We're going to load up the model, a little bit of query binding, passing in the SQL, passing in the params, then we're going to redirect to store basket display and save it. So now, if I take you back to the basket, I'm going to click remove, and now you can see we've got no items in our basket. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Now it's tempting to end the video there, but there's a lot of fine details that I think that they really are worth spending the time to get them done right. For example, let's imagine somebody goes into the shop and they pick one small t-shirt. There you go. Now imagine they go back into the shop and they pick another small and they say, give me 2 of those. Well, you can see that it's added another row onto the basket table. But I actually think this is less than ideal. In these types of situations, I think it should just update the quantity, not add another row. So, let's do something about that. I'm going to go back to store basket, add to basket. Here it is right here, okay? And before we do the insert, as we're doing beforehand, let's attempt to fetch an existing basket row for this item and customer. So the way that we might do that is we could say params session ID is session ID. Okay, we know about that. Then we could say params item ID is data item ID. We know that that's been passed in. And then we could say SQL equals select all from store basket where session ID, now think about your store basket table. We've got a session ID and we've got an item ID. I suppose there's no real reason why, but it feels right doing them in the order they appear, doesn't it? I don't know why. Doesn't really affect anything. But we're going to select all from store basket where item ID equals colon item ID and session ID equals colon session ID. There's our query. And now I'm going to say rows equals this, calling on the model, query bind, pass in the SQL, pass in the params, don't you love an object. Now, if is set rows 0, that means this item is already in the basket. So just update the quantity. So how would we do that? Well, we could say existing quantity is rows 0 loading up item QTY. Then I'm going to say data item QTY. So this is our new quantity. And it's going to be the existing quantity plus data item quantity which has been passed in. And of course, we can then say update ID is rows 0 loading up ID. And we're just going to update the existing basket row. So I'll say this model update with this update ID and that data on store basket. So that takes care of that. Otherwise, we can just do an insert. There you go. So let's save that and we'll give this a little test. I'll remove all of the items and we'll go into a t-shirt. I'm going to get one small t-shirt and then I'm going to go back into the shop and I'm going to get small again and I'll choose 2 small. And as you can see, it has updated the quantity, which is perfect. Okay, now that was going to be the end of the video. And I know it's been a long video, but I thought of just one more tweak that I would like to do. You see, this is all very well if we have items that have got sizes assigned to them. However, there is a possibility that the site owner could go to the admin panel and maybe they're going to create a record for some kind of item that does not have sizes. I think I mentioned earlier on a television, for example. So I'll say television, right? And I'll say, here is a television, and please do join in. I'll say, this is one size fits all. So just, I don't know, any product that does not have sizes. Now I'm going to assume that the price is maybe $5.99. I'll say that it's in stock. Okay, now I've made a little picture of a TV just to speed things up. So if you go to trongate.io/TV, then you'll see a little picture here that I prepared. Now you can right click and save that to your desktop or wherever you want actually. And now I'm going to go to the admin panel and I'm just going to upload our TV picture for this item. Okay, so there it is. Now back over to the shop and you can see that we've now got a television here. And by the way, please keep in mind that this is a rubbish design, okay? I'm not looking for any web design awards here. But when we go in and we view this item, the item has not had any sizes assigned. So when we click select size, there's nothing there. And by the way, when we go to merch and then add to cart, well, you can see that we've got this validation rule that says that the item size ID is required and numeric. So clearly this is going to be a problem for this type of item. So let me show you how we can sort that out. It's actually not too difficult. If we have a look at display item, well, we do have some size options. And we can easily, just to show you, we can say something like, in fact, let me do this somewhere meaningful. Maybe right after the form location, I'm going to say num size options is count size options. Now if I echo an H1 with num size options, I'm just doing an H1 so you can see this, and I'll close it off. Well, you know that it's going to say 1 because we've only got one option. It's the one that says select size. So what we could do is we could say if the, now do we like spacing it? It's up to you. But I'm going to say if num size options is greater than 1, then we're going to do the drop down. Because what's the point in a drop down if there's only one option? Okay, so there we go. Now, if we don't have more than one sized option, we're going to echo form hidden. And we're going to have a hidden form field called item size ID with a value of 0. And by adding in this hidden form field, it means that this will get past this validation check here. Pretty cool, right? So if we now refresh this, you'll see that we've got quantity and add to cart. If I take you back to a t-shirt, you'll see that we've got the item size. Now all of the validation's still going to work. So if we have quantity of 0, we're still going to get that. So everything is fine. But if we add one of these to cart, you can see that it's looking not too bad. Now we do have a column here, or rather a little paragraph that says item size and it's empty. So the very last thing we'll do is we'll go to display basket. I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to say if is set item loading up size description. Something like that. We'll chuck in a little if statement. And that means that if we don't have a size assigned, then if we refresh, you'll see that it just says television. Okay, so that should all be adding up, and I hope you enjoyed that. In the next video, we're going to integrate this with a payment gateway, and we're actually going to integrate it with PayPal. I hope you'll join me then. I'll catch you later.